for being here. This is obviously a great turnout. I think we're running out of seats. That's a good thing. We're happy to have Jake Oleson back, and I'm actually really excited to introduce him because in coming up with a brief bio, it was really easy to come up with almost a page. So I'm going to read this faster than I should because I want to get to obviously the content. But Jake Oleson is a 1997 Central College alum. Got his degree in mathematics. Thank you very much. And he went on to earn his master's and PhD in statistics, in statistics at the University of Missouri Columbia. Since then, Jake has spent a bit of time as a professor at Arizona State, but moved to the University of Iowa in 2004. He's been there ever since. And he's ascended to be professor and director of graduate studies in the Department of Biostatistics, director of the Statistics Analytics Core of the Institute for Public Health Practice, Research and Policy, member of the Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center, the Cancer Epidemiology and Population Science Core. So he holds a lot of hats. This is a good thing. His work includes presenting population health data, working with state agencies to analyze and interpret state data, managing insurance claims data for research, creating maps displaying estimated cancer rates in small geographic areas with small populations, and he's particularly known for his work in speech, hearing, and language-related research projects, so a wide variety of interests. Dr. Oleson's disciplinary work focuses on Bayesian spatial and spatiotemporal models for sparse data and infectious disease modeling. Okay, it's a lot of stuff. We're very happy to have Jake back. Last time he was here on campus to talk was almost exactly 20 years ago, so we're really happy to have him again. He's going to talk to us today about analyzing and investigating Iowa's cancer rate. So let's give him a round of applause, please. And I'd also request, please make sure your phones are off or on mute or something like that, just out of respect for what we're going to do here. So take it away, Jake.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm honored and a little humbled at the audience here. So thank you for coming and listening to whatever it is that I'm about to say. Yeah, I was. Well, let me. You see the title up there, but before we get into the title, I want to give you a little bit of a timeline of where I got to where I am, the path along the way. So, yeah, first of all, Central College math major. The math major, I was not the top math major student along the way, but I was able to do the math, and I liked to do the math, but I also liked science. And I was looking for something that could really bridge the gap between the scientific areas I was interested in and the math that I was interested in. So along the way somewhere, I took a class in statistics here at Central. And that was the closest thing. It seems that is what I'm after. I want to go after that statistics and start to use the math skills in more direct, real-world ways. Oh, I go to Missouri to the Department of Statistics, get a math major, get a master's degree, thinking I'll get a master's degree in 2 years and move on and get a nice job from there. I looked around at jobs, I also looked at a PhD and thought, you know what, I never, in my wildest dreams, thought a PhD was possible, but the jobs that PhD graduates are doing looked more interesting to me than the jobs that the master's students were doing. So I stuck around, got my PhD, and part of doing the degree in graduate school is you often have an assistantship that helps pay for your way through graduate school. I worked with, did some teaching along the way. I worked with the University of Missouri hospitals, and I also worked with the State of Missouri Department of Conservation through my journey, and I really liked that applied side, working with teams of people in scientific areas. Graduated with my PhD, went to Arizona State, where the faculty member there, but working also with the Center for Environmental Studies. Again, keeping that applied part of it in play. I thought, that is my favorite part of the job, so I'm going to go all in and go down to Biostatistics, move back to Iowa, where I've been here since 2004. The first 10 years of that were as a faculty member, teaching classes, doing research. I have interacted with people in College of Public Health, College of Medicine, College of Dentistry, College of Pharmacy, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, College of Business. I think I've listed them all. So I've interacted with people from a wide variety of areas. Part of the reason I wanted to be a math major was that they didn't have to write as many papers, they didn't have to talk to as many people. And now that's mostly what my job is doing those two things, so I failed. That's my original goal. So I'm working with all those different areas. That was the first 10 years, and then I started the last 10 years, Director of Graduate Studies, working with helping our students along to the graduate program in a variety of ways, and directing what we used to call the Center for Public Health Statistics, and we merged to now the Institute for Public Health Practice, Research, and Policy. Part of what we do is work with the state government as they have analytical needs that they can't manage. We're one of the first groups that they talk to for help on doing those analyses. In today's talk, it comes about through part of those discussions. So I want to talk about cancer, but first we'll start off with Iowa's population, a little distribution of what it looks like, and it is, I think you've heard that Iowa has an older population relative to the rest of the country, and that's shown in this graphic, and then the state map over here shows where there is growth, where is it, and the biggest green is Dallas County, western suburbs of Des Moines. Move into talking about the health of Iowans. Here's a figure we created a while ago for a group looking at what are the causes of death in Iowa. So we down on this axis, you see broken down by age group, and each color represents a category. Cancer would be the red category. So you see it really exploding, starting in roughly the 40-year-old group and going on. In the purple are stroke, heart disease, diabetes. The younger age groups in the blue, what are known as accidental deaths, firearms, burns, drowning, falls, motor vehicles for the youngest age groups. And there in the middle, the green related to poison, suicides, and homicides. So you can see the spectrum. We're going to focus in this particular project on cancer, but we look at all of these pieces in different contexts. So in the news lately, you may have seen that Iowa's cancer incidence is rising. Iowa is one of 2 states with a rising cancer rates. And we're number 2 in number of cancer cases, age-adjusted cancer incidence. So even though we know that Iowa has an older population, so maybe Iowa has more cases because we're older. Well, we look at that, you remove age from the equation and say, well, if we didn't have to think about age, and age wasn't a factor, then how does it look? Well, we're still high even when we factor in age. But we want to then look at why is this happening? Here's what we're looking at since 2002 to 2023. In black, there are U.S. trends on average, and U.S. cancer trends have been declining over that span. Iowa was tracking along with the U.S. pretty well until about 2012, 2013, when we see it spike and start to trend up. So when we say that Iowa has the largest rates, we're looking at Iowa's increasing rates, and then relative to 2013, we have been increasing while the rest of the nation has been decreasing. So there are the age-adjusted rates, and I mentioned that we want to take age out of the equation. So if we look at this without factoring in age, that's the dashed line. what we call those crude rates. And so it's just what's the overall US rate, that's the gray dashed line, and the overall rate in Iowa, the yellow dashed line. And then we factor in age, or factor out age. And we see pretty much the same pattern, although it's not quite as big, but it's still the same pattern. So we want to try to tackle this. There's a lot of factors that could be at play. So let's first of all look at urban-rural. Iowa's a rural state. Maybe it has something to do with the rural population. Maybe it has something to do with the urban population. Well, on the left, we have Iowa's age-adjusted rate for new cancers. And you see urban and rural have pretty much the same pattern. It doesn't seem to be something specific to rural or urban, or at least using the urban-rural definitions that we've used, because you can define that in a variety of ways. On the other side, what about cancer deaths? Are there more deaths, urban or rural, getting at access to care? It doesn't look like there's a real difference, much of a difference between urban and rural mortality in Iowa. All right, so some more background slides on where Iowa is with cancer. Where are we in the top 10 across the country? Number 1, Oral Cavity. 3 in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. 4, leukemia, esophageal melanoma. 8, melanoma, kidney, renal, pelvis, and bladder, tentacle, rectal, and then we also top 20 in all of these others. And so one of the things that we then, Iowa is predominantly white, but is this driven by, is it just the white population, or is it other races, things that we look at? We can see we're still high in most other races in specific areas. So it seems to be across the board in Iowa. There does not appear to be one thing causing the cancer in Iowa from what we've seen. We haven't seen evidence that there's one thing that's attributing to this. And I'll show you evidence of that as we go through. This is from the American Association for Cancer Research, U.S. Surgeon General information of what are health behavior factors related to cancer. So these are some of the pieces that we'll be looking at. Smoking is a known, something that's known to be related. Excess body weight, alcohol consumption, ultraviolet light, poor diet, pathogenic infections, physical activity, all things that are behavior related that might be related to cancer. So these are some of the pieces that we want to look at. These are definitely not, these are health behaviors. There are other factors that we can talk about. And so, identifying why is Iowa increasing? We want to target which cancers is it? Is it because all of them are increasing, or is it specific ones? And because looking at every cancer site is going to take us a lot of time and effort to pour through all of it. And so, first of all, we want to try and identify which cancers might be leading to Iowa's increase. And if it's just specific cancers, then we can target those more specifically. Then, where is it? Once we've targeted which cancer sites that we want to look at, where, and here's one of the maps I'll show later as well, where are the areas the highest, and is there some cause in those regions for why they might be high? And then finally, why? Once we know which cancers we'll look at, where they are, why might those be increasing, that'll be the last piece of the things that we're looking at for right now. So far, remember I'm a math major. I haven't talked about any math yet. So we'll have to start getting there. So which cancers are driving the increase? As I said, Iowa's increasing since about 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. So we're going to focus on from 2013 on and start to look at what are the drivers making us different. One thing we can look at, we went to this, but we picked out every cancer site, prostate cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer, melanoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, 28 or so different cancer sites, and created this graph from 2013 on and calculated the slope. What's the slope for the US? What's the slope for Iowa? That is what you see in this figure. The red dots for down on this side are all the cancer sites, probably too small for you to read. Prostate on top, female breast second, lung and bronchus third, melanoma fourth, urinary bladder 5, kidney and renal pelvis 6, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 7, and so on. But we can see where the slopes, where the trends are the most different between Iowa and the US. But that's not all of the equation, because we might have a really steep slope where the US is declining, but it's a very rare cancer, so it's maybe 10 total cases that we'll be talking about. That would be driving it, but they would have totally different slopes. So we want to factor that information in as well, which is what we did then in this figure. We put Iowa and the US on the same scale of 100 per 100,000. That's a standard rate that's used in cancer research, is how many cases are there per 100,000. So if my county had 100,000 people and this county had 100,000 people, which one had more cases? If Iowa had 100,000 people and the entire US had 100,000 people, how do they relate? So we take the US trend versus the Iowa trend and say, out of 100,000 people, how many more cases does Iowa have over that time span than the US would have? And prostate is up near 60. So it is the biggest driver of this. Second, female breast is upper 20s, 27, 28, somewhere in there is the difference, followed by lung, which is maybe 19. Those are the four that have more than 10 cases difference over that time frame. And then there's a couple that show up, urinary bladder, kidney, and renal between 5 and 10, and then everything else is less than that. So this tells us that we want to focus on these 4 cancers going forward. So focusing on those 4 cancers, where are they? Well, yes, my background is in spatial statistics, spatial temporal statistics, looking geographically how things change. Looked at hunting patterns, looked at infectious disease patterns, looking at cancer patterns here. So where did the rate of cancer increase the most? Which county? Well, the counties in red increased by more than 5% over that time span. And this factors in population change for Dallas County. If we don't factor in population change, it looks like Dallas County is the worst because they had the biggest increase of people. But once you factor in population change, then Dallas County doesn't have, I think it's increased up to 1% is in that category. So those might be some counties we want to look at for the increase. That's across all cancers. And I said we're going to look at each specific cancer. So as we look at individual cancers, there are more and more online tools to look at data. This is one of them, the Cancer in Focus. The CDC spent a lot of time putting this together for specific states. It's not the entire country, but quite a few states are part of this, and then you can look at, you can click on these. Looking at the county level, you can pick cancer incidence, and this is looking at all cancers. You can see which counties have the highest age-adjusted rate across all cancers. So we can look at a map like this with all cancers because there are unfortunately a lot of cases. But once we have a small number of cases, we have to worry about subject patient identifiability, so that individual people cannot be identified. So sample sizes in these regions, their rule is there have to be at least 10 cases for them to publish the data to mask individual identifiability. So with that, we can show all of the counties. We pick something like ovarian cancer, we cannot. So if you're like me and you come from one of the rural areas of the state, you really don't know what's going on in your rural area. So that's part of what we're trying to do, is create a way to show cancer rates in rural areas where we know we're going to have small sample sizes. And not only that, counties are diverse. Somebody who lives in Pella is not exactly the same as everybody else who lives in Marion County. And that's true for every county in the state. So if we want to identify more specifically what cancer rates are at, we would need to get smaller geographic regions. And we have picked zip codes. We want to show cancer rates at the zip code level when we can't even show them at the county level. So that's been one of our tasks the last many years, to create these estimates at the zip code level and be able to put them on the web. And so in 2017, we started working with the Iowa Cancer Registry to do this. Actually, we started around 2015. And then by 2017, we had a product that we could show. This is one of my former students, Caitlin Ward. This was part of her master's project to come up with some of this. Create maps using spatial statistical methods that are going to quantify risk, cancer risk, and hopefully in a way that's easy to understand. And then use that to identify where things differ geographically, because the Iowa Cancer Registry and Iowa Health and Human Services want to target individual communities for intervention, because they want to know where is this happening, why is it happening, so they can go into individual areas and try and do something. So that's the ultimate goal. So this was what we came up with at the time. Here we're showing, what are we showing? I think this is cervical or colorectal. I can't remember what I put on there. And if you go to the Iowa Cancer Registry website, this is the map that will be on there. It's outdated. It only goes up to 2018. We have newer maps that go up to 2022, but they're not available yet. But I'll give you a sneak peek as to what they're going to look like. With this, we created the statistical model, and I'll walk through kind of what that does. You hover over each zip code, it tells you what that city is. So you can then identify what is the cancer risk in your area. But it's not at the age-adjusted rate scale. This is on a scale from 0 to 1, a probability. And that probability is the probability that your area is above the state average. And if you're above the state average, then you're more at risk than the average Iowan living in that region. And there's also then a statistical measure behind that. We can say with 95% probability and determine where that cutoff is, so we can find hotspots of what's a 90% probability and what's a 95% probability that goes along with these maps. So zip codes are actually arranged by the post office. If you didn't know this, then you can't actually use zip codes because they're lines following roads. So the Census Bureau put together these things called zip code tabulation areas, or ZICTA, that roughly represent what that zip code would be. It's not exact, but it's close enough for most people's use. Other researchers I work with do not like these, and there's a lot of really good reasons why they don't. They like census tracts. And I'm going to have this conversation with them next week, I think, where I explain why I like ZICTAs, and that's because I don't want this, my primary focus is not researchers, but it's the general population. I want the general population to go into their area, and I don't think you could probably tell me what census tract you live in. But you could tell me what zip code you live in. So that's the purpose of going with this versus census tract. Even though statistically there's a lot of reasons why census tracts would be better. All right, so we're going to look at breast, cervical, colorectal, liver, lung, lymphoma, melanoma, prostate. There are 935 ZICTAs in Iowa. Instead of 99 counties, we're dividing everything by 10. Colorectal. The vast majority were less than 10 cases. So we need to do a really, really good job of masking the raw data in order to come up with estimates that we can show. So everything that we're going to do from here on out, we are not showing real data. We are showing estimates that should have a basis in reality, a strong basis in reality, but it is not the real thing. There is a regression model behind the scenes. It's a Poisson regression model. From a statistical point of view, it's a fairly simplistic model to do this. And we have a factor for Z in those models. So we looked at a lot of different ways of doing this. And we used different methods to determine what the best one is, and it turned out to be this. Z is a ZICTA effect. Some have higher values for whatever reason than others. And a T represents time, how that ZICTA, or how the state is changing over time. And then the delta times T is that some ZICTAs are going to change at different rates than others. So that's what goes into this. There's some age that goes into this, some population size that goes into it, but that's it. We're not going to adjust for any other pieces at this time. In our model, the top part of this says, how are we doing the spatial effect? Well, ZICTAs have these regions, and they're not squares. Counties are squares, for the most part. The ZICTAs are not. So any ZICTA that shares a boundary we call a neighbor. And if you're a neighbor, you should have similar rates. So instead of showing just your rate, we're going to show a weighted average of your rate and the neighbors. That's essentially how the spatial pattern is going to change. It allows us to bring in extra data. It's because yours is too small, but once you collapse across an area, then you're just going to smooth things out. Do the same thing with time, that the time points are related to each other. And so you're not just focusing on your time, but what's your correlation with the time period before, and we can bring in more data. And once we bring that data, we call that smoothing. We're able to get more smoothed estimates, and then we can show the estimates that come from it. Well, we did colorectal cancer, and this was the result. And there's not a whole lot that you can get from that. It all looks to be blue or bluish white, even though the rates changed quite a bit over that span. This is on a relative risk scale. 1 would be the state average. 0 would be less than the state average. In the blue, red, which you can't see, but there are some in there, are above the state average. But still, this was too close to the raw data for us. Still, we wanted to do another layer of masking before putting numbers out there. This gave us something we call the risk probability. So instead of just what number are you on a relative risk scale, what's the probability that you're above 1 or above the state average? And I like that because now we're on a probability scale, and probability scales mean a lot to me as a statistician. So we created that, and these are the exact same data. But the The bottom is our risk probability scale, and you can now see a lot more of the pattern that's happened. So then we put those maps up there. The Iowa Cancer Registry had been using those maps for quite a while. They go tour not only the state of Iowa, but they go around the country presenting this information, and other states are asking, can we do this for them? Well, as they were doing that, they had, so as a statistician, the risk probability, putting this all on a probability measure scale, made a ton of sense to me. They went out and nobody understood it. Because what I forgot is that most of the population thinks of probabilities as three numbers. It's either 0, 100, or 50-50. Nothing else really matters. So we had to go back to the drawing scale and say, yeah, we like the probability. There are statistical properties behind it that we like. But how can we update this to be more useful to the community that's using this information? So they asked us, can we put age-adjusted rates on these maps? And was not a straightforward ask. Here you see some slides as to how we go about doing this. This is years of work. This was actually one of my students' dissertations to put this together. So the way the age-adjusted rate works is you create a crude rate for each age group that we're interested in. So we break the population into multiple age groups, calculate what would the rate be for each age group, and then do a weighted average of those weighted to some specific population. So then we get everybody on the same scale. And then that takes age out of the equation. So we need to do this inside of our statistical model, which is what this shows. And then in a Bayesian statistical model, we have to have additional information to feed into the statistical model. This is it. I can tell you more about that, all the specifics of it, if you want to hear about how we do that. So, before we had, the relative risk values we could show because we were masking things behind a statistical model. And then we went a step further and went to the risk probability, where you really cannot see a number there and back calculate how many cases there were. Now we're doing the same thing. We're much the same process, but now we're doing it by age group. But we don't show by age group results, we show a combined result. So even if you see the results of this, it's really, really hard, or not possible to back calculate what the raw data actually was. And then we still want to count, so R is the risk probability then. So now we're going to have an age-adjusted rate and a risk probability. So I can look at the risk probability because it made more sense to me, but everybody else can look at the age-adjusted rate maps. So that brought us to our new tool. We are 3 years in the making. We are ready to release this to the public, but we have a few more numbers to double check before we do. So you're going to see some of these maps, but you cannot yet access them because you're not going to find it on the web. But it will be very, very soon. An interactive tool. It's going to have those same 8 cancers. You can switch between ZICTA and county. Some people prefer to look at the county level. And you can specify, I want to look male only. I want to look female only. I want to look at a specific year group, and we also have an ability to look at race-specific estimates. We'll have an age-adjusted rate, risk probability, population estimate, and it allows you to find the hot spots very quickly. So here's what our new maps look like. You can see we still have the ability to hover over this and find a specific region. The person who put this one together for me, I don't know why, other than make me mad, picked Ames. I don't know why they would do that. It shows the age-adjusted rate, the risk probability, and we can then flip between those different items. This is colorectal cancer, 2006 to 2010. On the left are the options that the person can use to select all of these different factors that we want to look at. Down here is going to be a description of what it is that we're looking at. Part of what we have done is work with users to see the initial versions of this so that we can then go back and forth to improve it to get a wider variety of people looking at it. And we also work with patient advocates who take a look at this and have given us feedback to make this more useful to more people. So that's what's going to show up in some of these other dialog boxes, more explanations for different groups of individuals. We can also then have risk probability. This is 2016 to 2020. For, what do I have here? Breast cancer. And the different regions. So I will dive in a little bit more into these maps in a second. There's an ability to look at filtering. Do I want to find the regions that with a 90% probability are above the state average, a 95% probability? We can select the specific one and it will show only those regions. And then you can download a table of data with only those regions. We add in layers, towns and rivers and streets and counties, so you can factor in other information. Think of a Google map sitting behind these that you can then zoom into. All right, so I said 4 cancers. First one was prostate. This is the most recent data that was available at the time. I printed this, 2016 to 2020. Highlighted in red is Pella. So we look at this, where is prostate cancer the highest? And we've seen, generally speaking, it has been the northwest corner of Iowa, and we've seen that for a long, long time. So we have ideas, but we're still looking more specifically so that we have more certainty behind what might be driving prostate cancer. And we know that it is the biggest driver, so it's going to be really important for us to identify reasons for these geographic regions to pop up. These are the above 95%, so we saw it in the previous graph, you see it again here. Breast cancer. Again, there's Pella highlighted, and where's breast cancer? And you can see it is not the same pattern as we just saw with prostate cancer. If there was one underlying cause of everything, we'd see every cancer have the same pattern, and they do not. What we know with breast cancer, this is highest in populated areas. And breast cancer, one of the risk factors is having babies at an older age, which happens in the metro and more educated regions. So that's part of why we see this specific pattern in breast cancer. It's not the only cause. There are other things, but it is a general pattern that we see. Lung cancer. Lung cancer has always been shown to be higher in southern Iowa than it is in northern Iowa. So we're going to be looking more specifically at some of the risk factors behind that that might be unique to the southern part of Iowa that's not in the northern part. Melanoma, more common in the northern half of Iowa, less in the southern half. Again, what makes those regions unique? So now we've seen more of the where. It's not one pattern that's definitely causing all of it. We have these maps for Iowa, we have them for New Mexico, we're finishing up creating them for Kentucky, and we have contracts with 6 other states to start doing this for more states. Hopefully. So now, why are those increases? And I'll go through this quickly. This is a breakup of Iowa's most rural counties micropolitan and metropolitan. So we have metropolitan areas, Des Moines and surrounding counties, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, Waterloo, and that area. Micropolitan are the Pella, Marion County, and there are cities there that drive the economics of that region, but it's not a big city by Census Bureau standards. And then rural that don't have any of those. And we see that the cancer rates where the increasing, well, it's all over the place because it's cancer specific, and this is all cancers. We might be able to look at age groups. Are there specific age groups that are increasing cancer incidence? And where might that be? And again, if I put this up long enough, it's all over the place. It's hard to see any pattern with it. So going back to the modifiable cancer risks, we can start to look at some of these. There's data that we can get county level estimates of, there's a behavioral risk factor surveillance system, is a national survey that goes out and tracks some of this information. And we can get county level estimates of what percentage of the county is, for example, binge drinking. There's a question on the survey: have you done binge drinking in the last week, in the last month? And then use the proportion of that. So counties that have a higher binge drinking rate, might that be related to a higher prostate cancer? And just plot those together, and it looks like, well, maybe there is an increasing pattern. We can do the same thing with breast cancer. Binge drinking is one thing; it's a known risk factor. So how does that look in Iowa in the age-adjusted rates at the county level for us versus binge drinking? And you don't see much of a pattern with that. Lung, there are more risk factors for lung, so we put in more things with lung: cigarette smoking, obesity, and physical activity, and we see positive patterns with that. But a lot of variability for sure, but a general positive pattern. And melanoma, a positive pattern with binge drinking. But this is what we call ecological data. I did not say that we have data from individual people in each county and know whether they had cancer or not. We know how many people in a county got cancer, and we know roughly what percentage of people that are drinking in that county got cancer, or drinking in that county. But we don't know if people that got cancer were actually the ones drinking. We can't link those together. It's called the ecological fallacy, that maybe there's a relationship there, maybe that's real, but maybe it's not, because we're not looking at individual specific data. So we want to try and get down to more granular data so we can better prove any relationships that might or might not be there. And so as you're looking through statistical studies, we always keep in mind, is that pattern real, because of the way that the data were collected and the statistical analysis was carried out. And maps like this come to mind. This shows the correlation between the distance between the Saturn and the Sun versus Google searches of how to make a baby. They are almost perfectly correlated with each other. Doesn't mean that one causes the other. So with ecological data, this kind of thing can happen, and we want to be very, very clear and careful that we're reporting things that make sense. The website, type in spurious correlations. There's hundreds of these. They're fantastic. I did almost none of the work involved with this. I have a huge team of people that I work with, myself, epidemiologists, biostatisticians, students, geographers, patient advocate, and so we all work together to try and do this, and we're trying to accomplish quite a few things. So hopefully we publish that, we get that website up soon. And that's what I have. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Let's go ahead and give Jake a round of applause for We've got maybe 5 minutes for any questions all might have.
Yes.
Raw data question. Is there an assumption or is it known that every state is uniform in reporting cancer statistics?
They are not. Iowa is one of the best at reporting cancer statistics. Other states are not good. So we work with most states across the country and know which ones are better at reporting than not reporting. So for example, melanoma, highest in northern Iowa. What's it look like in southern Minnesota? We don't know because we don't have access to the specific data we need to do that. So yeah, each state has different rules and regulations for what they can and cannot show. Yeah, I have to deal with legal things these days. Yes.
Do you feel like how each state, like maybe 6 counties can affect your data as well? Because I know states go through like different procedures.
So that's part of counties and zip codes and census tracts. The way that those are defined makes a difference. How big they are makes a difference. It also matters with accuracy. The accuracy, if somebody lives in a county, is pretty good. The accuracy for zip code is sometimes not as good. And do a lot of data dives to figure out what's real and what's not. So yes, it matters. We're doing this for New Mexico, and I can share this piece of it. There was one estimate that just did not seem right. It was throwing everything off, and it was because for that time frame in that zip code, there were more cases than people, which is a problem. Statistically, it causes us some problems, so we go back and rework things. So yes, that matters an awful lot. Yes.
What is the random effect, or can you give me an example of some of the random effects in your calculation of the adjusted rate?
We have 2 random effects. The random effect is for a zip code effect and one for a time effect. The zip code effect, it has more of an impact in regions where there is more data. Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, then there's very little spatial random effect because you're going to be closer to the raw data because there's enough data there to get that estimate. The more rural areas where you don't have enough data to be reliable, have a reliable estimate, then you look at your neighbors, but your neighbors are small too and don't have enough data. And so there's a pretty strong spatial effect then of what's going to happen to that region, and especially with the variance of our estimate is going to be very big because there's just not enough data to have a reliable estimate. So that's the general spatial effect. It depends on the population of the area more than anything else. Yes?
So what's done now with this data? Who's gonna take it? Or they go out and investigate and try and figure out what's causing the changes in the cancer and increase, decrease what's causing the cancer and everything, and then they just keep going from there?
Our next step is to gather more of the behavioral risk factor data and do causal inference statistics to, instead of looking at associations, can we do causal effects between those risk factors and the age-adjusted rates that we have. We're going to look at environmental effects. There's a lot of people very curious about water quality, so it's something that we're going to look at, but we have not yet. It is a very, very challenging problem. And down the road, genetics also plays a role, and so we would like to also look at genetics. So there's a lot of pieces that we'd like to someday get to.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that then. So if and when you start investigating some of those behavioral effects, does that mean, you were sharing a list of your already large team. Does that mean, are you going to find a need then to have to enlarge the sort of knowledge background of those that are helping you investigate that?
Our team is already growing.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, it'll have to grow because there are specific skill sets that we're going to need to do some of the things that we want to do.
Can you maybe just like 1 or 2 of those like maybe surprising skill sets that might be Edie?
We are going to need somebody who does causal inference at a spatial and geographic level. It's a very specialized skill set. Now we can do it, but there are other people who can do it better and faster than what we could do. There will be some AI and machine learning that go into some of the future things that we do. We can do some of that. Some of it we may have to hire someone else to help out, so that's another piece that we might bring in. And then once we go into individual communities, we need people who can go into communities and do interventions.
So maybe one more question if it's out there. Dr. B, bring it home.
Would you say that the biostatistics world, are there career options there growing pretty rapidly?
So I'm the director of graduate studies. Our students have a 100% placement in jobs. They usually have jobs. They're starting to get offers now that are going to be graduating in May. So they get offers before they graduate usually. Master's graduates today start at about $75,000 a year. PhD graduates, depending on what they're doing, will start around $120,000, $130,000 a year. So yes, there's a healthy job market in biostatistics.
And on that note, let's
I have a summer, if you're interested, we have a summer institute where we introduce you to the world of biostatistics for 7 weeks during the summer. I have flyers here, I will leave them here, so come and grab some if you're interested or want to ask me about it.
What majors would you be interested in?
Any majors. We have math majors that like science, and we have science majors that like math. We have a variety.
Awesome. So before you leave, please grab some cookies. Well, let's give Jake one more round of applause.